"So you really are here," Irene said, her voice rough. "I came to help Aunt Clara with a few things. What are you doing here?" Before she could answer, a familiar voice came from behind him. "Oh, you came after all?" Clara appeared, wearing a pale robe, her expression calm as if nothing had ever happened. "I was just making coffee. Want a cup?" Irene's tone turned icy. "I didn't come here for coffee." "Oh, the past again. You must be exhausted, Irene." Irene opened her bag, pulled out the photograph, and laid it on the table. "Then explain this." Clara bent down, glanced at the picture, then smiled faintly. "Impressive. You're still good with tech. Where'd you edit this one?" Irene blinked. "What?" "The video, the photo, the voice you forgot how easy it is to fake things these days. You really went this far just to frame me?" Jacob frowned. "Mom, is that true?" Irene turned to him, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, you have to believe me. It's real traffic footage. I recovered it last night." Clara tilted her head, her voice soft as a whisper. "See, Jacob? When people are consumed by guilt, they'll make up anything to defend themselves." "Stop it, Clara!" Irene shouted. Clara's gaze turned sharp. "You ruined his life, and now you're trying to ruin mine? You're the one who put him in prison. You were driving that night, not me, not David." "Do you have proof?" Clara sneered. "Or just the distorted memory of a woman who once had a breakdown?" Jacob stood between them, fists clenched. "Enough!" he shouted. "I don't want to hear any more. You always say you did everything to protect me, but all you do is make things worse." "Jacob, you don't understand." "No, you don't. Aunt Clara never said a bad word about you, but you can't stop accusing her. If you're lying, I can't forgive you." Irene felt her chest cave in. "You believe her more than your own mother?" Jacob looked away. "I believe what makes sense." The words struck like a blade. Clara placed a gentle hand on Jacob's shoulder. "It's all right, Jacob. Adults lose their way sometimes. We shouldn't blame them." Then she turned to Irene, smiling softly. "You see, your son's grown up. He can tell what's real and what's not." Irene trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. She reached toward Jacob, but he stepped back. "Mom, please, stop. I'm tired." And in that moment, Irene knew she had lost. Not because she lacked proof, but because Clara had stolen the only thing that mattered, her son's trust. When she left Clara's house, the rain had started again. Irene stood on the porch, staring into the gray downpour. Inside, through the window, she saw Clara's hand resting on Jacob's shoulder, whispering something in his ear. He lowered his head, his face shadowed with confusion. A flash of lightning lit Irene's face, pale, rain-soaked, but her eyes blazed with fury. "You can deceive everyone, Clara," she whispered, "but you'll never bury the truth forever." She turned and walked away, each step echoing against the wet stone, the sound like the broken heartbeat of a mother stabbed in the back by the sister she once loved, and the son she thought would never turn away. Duide la bandit sang ting ang, chun mi, kudon van ban vugui. The rain fell all night. Irene drove aimlessly along the wet, cold streets, her tears mixing with the rain, salty on her cheeks. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that everything her son, her reputation, her past was collapsing piece by piece. When the car finally stopped, she realized she was in front of St. Martha's Hospital, the place she had worked for nearly 20 years. The dim windows on the upper floors reminded her of the long night shifts she'd spent alone and of the small black USB she still kept in her coat pocket. She pulled it out and stared at it. A voice inside her said, if there was anything left to uncover, this was the last chance. Irene slipped into the archive computer room, the one she knew the surveillance cameras didn't run in at night. She plugged the USB in and opened the folder labeled Confessions. Beyond the emails she'd already read, there was this time one more file. Audio.log 02.mp3. She put on headphones and clicked play. The audio hissed, then a familiar voice came through Clara's. "David, listen. I can't let Irene find out about this. If she knows I was driving, she'll destroy everything. I just need you to keep quiet, to take the blame. I promise when it's over, we'll have Jacob back." Then a man's hoarse, weak voice. "Clara, you don't understand what you're doing. A person is dead, and you can still talk like this?" "It was an accident. But if I go to prison, Irene will take everything. Is that what you want?" "I only wanted her to live in peace." "Peace? She's lived too peacefully for too long. It's time she paid." A chair fell, a door slammed. The recording ended. Irene sat motionless, her heart pounding like a drum. Her hand trembled as she pressed it to her mouth. Every word, every breath on that tape was a knife cutting into the past. Clara, she had said it herself. Not only had she caused the crash, she'd forced David to take the blame. She opened the system log and found the file dated June 14, 2009, just 3 days after the accident. A copy of the truth, hidden in the USB Clara and David used to communicate. Perhaps David kept it as insurance, and now it was in Irene's hands. She stood and looked into the mirror at her own reflection. Gaunt, hollow-cheeked, but eyes alight. All those years of fear, guilt, and silence built on the belief that she alone was to blame, suddenly shifted. Irene realized she wasn't the only victim. She was the survivor. She copied the audio file to a secure drive, then sent an anonymous copy to the email of the old defense attorney who had handled the original case. In the note, she wrote only, "Listen to this. Prepare for a retrial." As she shut down the computer, she heard footsteps in the corridor. "Is someone there?" she whispered, her chest tightening. No answer. But a shadow slipped past the window slit Clara. Their eyes met for a single instant. Clara gave a faint smile and turned away, her figure dissolving into the dim light. Irene stood frozen. She knew Clara had noticed. From now on, this fight would no longer be underground. She stepped out into the parking lot. A cold wind hit her face. The night yawned black and deep, but inside Irene something brightened for the first time in 16 years. She possessed the whole truth. No more stories, no more distorted memories. The real voice of the guilty party. She gripped her car keys and whispered, "You want a war, Clara? Fine. This time, I won't run." The next morning, Irene drove to the office of attorney Alan Pierce, the lawyer who defended her 16 years ago when the crash shook the whole town. The small building sat beside a park. The early sunlight flashed off the glass, making everything gleam. When Irene walked in, Alan looked up from a stack of files, startled. "Irene, my God, I didn't expect to see you again." She nodded, her voice hoarse. "I'm here about David Ross. I have new evidence." Alan fell quiet and gestured to a chair. "Sit." "Tell me." Irene put the USB on his desk, her hands trembling but resolute. "There's a recording on here between Clara Moore and David Ross from the night after the accident. She confesses she was the one driving." Alan opened his laptop and played the file. When Clara's voice, cold and clear, filled the room, everyone went still. "If I go to prison, Irene will take everything. Is that what you want?" When the audio ended, Alan leaned back and drew a long breath. My God! For the first time in years, Irene saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I need you to reopen the case, not just to clear my name, but so my son can know the truth." Alan nodded slowly. "All right, I'll start the file review. But you understand once this breaks, it won't stay quiet." "I don't want it quiet anymore," Irene said firmly. "I want the light on the darkest part." 2 days later, the news spread faster than she expected. A local paper ran a story. 2009, crash may be reopened, new suspect, a woman named Moore. The article didn't name names, but in a town this small, everyone knew who a woman named Moore could mean Clara or Irene. Social media exploded with rumors. Some said Irene was fabricating evidence to save herself. Others claimed Clara had hidden her crime for 16 years. Jacob, he stayed silent. No texts, no return home. That afternoon, as Irene left the hospital, she found reporters waiting at the gate cameras, mics, a swarm of questions. "Miss Irene, are you accusing your sister? Are you trying to frame someone else to clear your name? Do you have any ties to David Ross?" Irene kept her head down and walked, her heart pounding. Everything was spiraling out of control. Back home, she switched on the TV and froze. Clara sat on a talk show, composed and polished, speaking with chilling calm. "I don't want to say bad things about my sister, but she has unresolved trauma. She hasn't recovered from the loss years ago. I only hope she gets help, rather than invent stories." The host asked, "You say you weren't involved in the crash?" Clara smiled mildly. "Of course not. I have proof I was home that night. If necessary, I'll hand it to the police." Irene watched the image, rage flushing her face. "Proof at home? Lies!" she shouted, hurling the remote across the room. At that moment, her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "You think you can beat her? Watch yourself." Irene tightened her grip on the phone. She understood this was no longer private. Clara had taken the fight into the open. That night she sat by the window, looking out into the dark. Wind moved the curtains, carrying whispers of fear and resolve. She knew that tomorrow, the media, relatives, neighbors, they would all come. But this time, she wouldn't run. "If the truth makes them hate me," Irene whispered, "then I will live with their hatred, but they will see it." She folded her hands, eyes steady. The battle between the sisters, once hidden in shadow, had now erupted in full view of the world. Rumors spread like wildfire. 3 days after Jacob moved in with Clara, every online outlet ran headlines. Nurse Irene Moore, accused of fabricating evidence in 2009, crashed to frame her sister. The Moore family, the town's new tragedy. Photos ran alongside the story's Irene, stepping out of the hospital, face taut with stress, and a blurred image of Clara wiping tears in front of the camera. "My sister used to be a good person, but the trauma made her lose control," Clara said, voice catching. "I don't want to sue. I just want her to get help rather than invent falsehoods." Her words were a poisoned blade. They drew public sympathy while casting Irene as unstable in the court of public opinion. That afternoon, Irene received a letter from the police. Request to cooperate in an investigation into alleged evidence forgery and dissemination of false information. She sank down at the table, the paper slipping from her hand. Tears ran down her cheeks. She had never imagined falling so low, stripped of trust, smeared, dragged through the mud by her own sister. The phone rang. It was Alan, her lawyer. "Irene, stay calm. Clara has submitted a rebuttal, another audio clip in which your voice supposedly threatens David. They're using it to strike back." "No way," she cried. "I never said those things." Alan's voice was steady. "I know. But if they doctored the file, it will be hard to prove. I'm looking for an audio forensics expert, but we'll need someone inside the system to trace the source." Irene gripped the phone and whispered, "I know who can help." She went to the hospital at dusk and found Lucas, the IT engineer who had helped her before. He was wearing headphones and typing. He jumped when he saw her. "Irene, do you know what the papers are saying?" "I don't care. Lucas, do you still have the logs from last time?" "I do. What do you need?" She told him everything, and her eyes lit up when she described the fake audio. Lucas listened, then nodded. "All right. I can trace when the file was altered. If it's fake, there will still be traces." "Can you do it now?" "Give me a few hours." He worked, fingers flying over the keyboard, code scrolling down the monitor, the screen's blue light reflecting across Irene's tired face. Finally, Lucas said, "Got it." He zoomed into the data and pointed to a string, modified by user C More Device ID, MTH Office 01. Irene held her breath. MTH. That's the company my sister manages. Lucas nodded. Not only that. The file was uploaded from the office's internal network 2 days before the story aired. She stood motionless, trembling anger and a strange relief warring inside her. So she faked my voice to defame me. Lucas looked grave. Irene, be careful. This person has power, money, and won't hesitate to destroy anyone in her way. She squeezed his hand, eyes wet. Thank you, Lucas. You're the only one who believes me. That night, Irene printed the log. She pinned the sheets on the living room wall, Clara on one side, David on the other, Jacob's photo in the middle. Red lines connected the pieces, a tangled web of lies. She looked at the photo of Jacob as a child and whispered, "My son, I will take everything back, your name, your trust." Outside, a car pulled up. Through the curtains, she saw a black SUV and recognized the plate. Clara stepped out, flanked by 2 men in black suits. She knocked on Irene's door, her voice cold. "You still won't stop, huh?" Irene didn't answer. She only stared at her sister with a blank, steely gaze. Clara smiled and leaned in, murmuring, "Fine. If you choose to fight, I'll make the whole world turn against you." Then she walked away, leaving a sharp perfume and the sense that a storm was coming. Irene stood there holding the printed log, the first weapon in her real counterattack. Rumors spread faster than Irene could breathe. On her phone screen, dozens of messages and comments poured in. A nurse faking evidence to profit from an old case? Heard she's being sued for blackmailing her own sister. She's gone mad. Poor kid. Irene tossed the phone onto the bed and buried her head in her hands. Every word she read cut into her like a knife. She knew exactly whose hand was behind it all. Clara's. Every blow was calculated. Every rumor perfectly timed. That afternoon, Mr. Brown, her kindly neighbor, knocked on the door. When Irene opened it, he looked uneasy. "Miss Irene, I just came from the community meeting. They're talking about asking you to leave the neighborhood." Irene froze. "Leave?" "They say the press will swarm here. They're worried about the kids, their jobs, the neighborhood's reputation." He sighed. "I don't believe everything they're saying, but you should be ready. People are angry." Night fell. The community hall was packed, familiar faces everywhere. Mrs. Taylor from the grocery, the baker, a few former co-workers, all looking at Irene with a mix of fear, curiosity, and contempt. On the stage stood Clara, flanked by members of the neighborhood council. Elegant as ever, her voice smooth as silk. "We all know recent events have made people uneasy. I don't want to speak ill of anyone, but I'm afraid my sister isn't well. She needs help, not to live in a peaceful neighborhood like ours." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "That's right." "I have children. I don't want them around someone like her." Irene shot to her feet, hands trembling but eyes blazing. "I'm not going anywhere." The room fell silent. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "You say I'm lying, that I forged evidence, but has anyone ever looked me in the eye and asked what I've lost? I lost my husband, my reputation, my only child. And now my sister, the same one you all call kind and decent, is destroying me all over again." Clara kept smiling, saying nothing. Irene went on. "I have proof." Her own voice confessing she drove that night. "I have system logs showing she forged files to frame me." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. A man stood up. "If you have proof, why aren't you in court instead of here?" Irene drew a deep breath. "I will be, and I won't let any of you forget that she killed someone and has buried that truth for 16 years. A sharp crack split the air. Clara had stepped forward and slapped her. The crowd froze. Clara's voice quivered, tears glistening too perfectly. "You're sick, Irene! You're destroying yourself!" A few people rushed to hold Irene back, afraid she'd lash out, but she just stood still, eyes glassy, lips pressed tight. "No," she said softly, her voice breaking yet fierce. "I'm not sick. I'm finally awake after 16 years of sleeping under your lies." The hall erupted whispers, shouts, arguments. Clara's composure cracked. She turned, her voice trembling. "We'll see who believes you, Irene. The world doesn't need another delusional woman." Irene watched her go, a faint, weary smile crossing her face. "You're right," she said quietly, "but the world deserves to know who you really are." As Clara walked away, the light from the stage fell across Irene's face, wet, exhausted, but burning bright. For the first time, she wasn't the accused. She was the voice. Late that night, back home, Irene opened her laptop. In her inbox was a new message from an anonymous address. "I know you're telling the truth. I used to work for Clara. Meet me tomorrow night. Old Doc." Irene stared at the words, heart pounding. Someone was willing to stand with her, a witness, a chance. She whispered, "Your game, Clara, is almost over." That night, Irene went to the old pier, the one abandoned after the 2011 storm. The sea wind tasted of salt. The waves slapped the wooden dock like a racing heartbeat. A fine mist blurred the lights, and the yellow lamps weakly lit the rusting containers. She walked slowly toward the coordinates in the email. A man stood at the far end of the pier, coat dark, hood pulled low so his face was half hidden. As Irene approached, he spoke in a dry, gravelly voice. "Don't be afraid. My name is Marcus Lee. I used to do the accounting for Clara Moore's company." Irene narrowed her eyes. "You're the one who sent the message?" "Yes." "And I have what you need, something Clara never wanted anyone to see." Marcus pulled a thick envelope from his coat, stuffed with papers. "These are the company ledgers for Clara's firm from 2008-2009. The year of the crash, she withdrew more than $200,000 from the insurance fund under emergency expenses. After that, the money vanished." Irene flipped through the pages, frowning. What did she use the money for? Marcus glanced around and lowered his voice. "To buy silence. The man who died in that accident. He wasn't just a passerby, like you were led to believe." Irene froze. "What are you saying?" Marcus produced an old, yellowed photograph. A middle-aged man in a suit stood beside Clara in front of a sign. "Moore Associates, Financial Advisors." "That's Richard Hale, the chief auditor. He discovered Clara's embezzlement. That night he arranged to meet her to confront her, and then the accident happened." The wind cut through them. Irene felt cold down to her spine. "You mean Clara caused the crash intentionally to kill him?" Marcus nodded slowly. "You can't prove it now, but I know because I overheard their last phone call." He took out an old tape recorder and pressed play. Over the steady patter of rain came a woman's voice, Clara's sharp and calm. "If you tell the police, I will make you regret it. Who would believe a thief like you?" Then the man's trembling voice. "Clara, I can't keep helping you." The sound of an engine revving, brakes squealing, then silence. The tape stopped. Irene could hardly breathe. She looked at Marcus, choking on her words. "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus exhaled. "I planned to keep quiet. But when I saw the press and watched her ruin you, I knew if someone didn't speak up, she'd win forever." He handed her a USB containing all the data and a scanned copy of the transfer signatures. "This is everything I have. Be careful, Clara never allows obstacles." From far away came the sound of an engine. Marcus flinched. "You should leave now," he urged. "We can't stay here." Irene nodded and gripped the envelope. She took a few steps, then a loud thud echoed behind her. She spun around. Marcus had collapsed, blood spreading across the wooden planks. Headlights flashed from the dark, then vanished. Irene stood rooted, rain mixing with blood at her feet. The envelope in her hands was soaked, but the papers inside were intact. Her jaw tightened, her eyes burning. "No, I won't let you die for nothing." On the drive home, she called Alan. "Alan, I have new proof. Clara killed someone else. It wasn't only David who was wronged." "I'll bring everything to you in the morning." "Oh my God, Irene. You've just put yourself in the crosshairs," he warned. "I know," she said, voice cold as steel. "But I'm not running. She must pay for everything." She hung up and stared out at the rain streaking the window like blood. "Clara, you killed to bury your secret, but you forgot one thing," she whispered. "I'm the only one left alive to tell it." The rain hadn't stopped all night. By morning, the sky was the color of ash. The cemetery sat on the northern hill, wind whipping through the mourning flags, slapping against the rain-soaked headstones. Irene stood among the small crowd, some of Marcus's former co-workers, a few curious townspeople, and of course, Clara. Clara wore a black dress, holding an umbrella, her face expressionless though her eyes glistened with just the right amount of tears. She knew the reporters were filming, and she performed grief as if it too belonged to her. "How tragic," Clara murmured, voice trembling sweetly as she approached. "Marcus was a good man. I never thought he'd take his own life." Irene stared at her, her gaze like a blade. "Take his own life?" Clara pressed her lips together and nodded softly. "That's what the police said. No signs of struggle. He felt guilty for helping frame me and decided to make amends." "You invented that too?" Irene whispered, voice shaking with fury. "I saw his blood. Someone shot him." Clara tilted her head, pity in her eyes that was colder than hate. "Irene, do you really think someone's been following you? You need help." A reporter stepped forward, microphone raised. "Ms. Moore, there are rumors you met with Marcus before his death. Can you confirm that?" Irene looked straight into the camera. "Yes. He gave me evidence against Clara Moore, right there, proof of fraud and murder." The crowd gasped. The reporter swung the camera toward Clara. Clara smiled serenely, voice as smooth as ever. "My sister has lost touch with reality. I don't want to press charges, but if she keeps making up stories, I'll have no choice but to involve the law." Irene took a step closer, clutching the sealed envelope that held Marcus's documents. "Who are you trying to scare? I have your voice on tape, and today it goes to the police." Clara's smile widened, a slow, mocking shake of her head. "Oh, then send it. But when they check for authenticity, who do you think they'll believe? A suspended nurse who's lost her son and been labeled unstable, or the respected director of a charitable foundation?" The words cut through Irene like frost. Around her, people began to edge back, their eyes wary, doubtful cold. Through the murmuring wind, Jacob appeared. Dressed in black, he walked slowly toward them. "Jacob," Irene's voice cracked. He looked at his mother, then turned to Clara. "Aunt Clara, Mom says you killed someone." "Is it true?" Clara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, speaking softly, but loud enough for all to hear. "No, sweetheart. I've never hurt anyone. But your mother, she needs help. I'm afraid she might do something to herself." The words fell like a verdict. Irene stepped forward, gripping her son's hand. "Don't believe her, Jacob. Marcus died trying to help me. Your aunt caused that crash years ago." Jacob pulled his hand away, eyes clouded but firm. "Mom, I just want this to end. You're scaring everyone." Clara looked at Irene and smiled a quiet, victorious curve of her lips. She leaned close, whispering so only Irene could hear. "The more you fight, the more you lose, Irene. They don't see a victim. They see a broken mother." Irene met her gaze, jaw clenched. "Do you think I'm afraid? You forget one thing: truth can be twisted. but it never dies. She pulled out her phone and hit send on a message, an audio file, and the data Marcus had given her. On the screen, a confirmation blinked. Sent to Detective Owens, St. Martha Police. Irene lifted her head and looked straight into the news camera. And now I officially accuse Clara Moore of murder, financial fraud, and defamation. The cemetery erupted in shouts and gasps. Clara's face blanched, her smile vanishing, then quickly reassembling, brittle and tight. You've just signed your own sentence, Irene, she whispered. The rain began to pour harder, drenching everything. Irene stood in the downpour, hair plastered to her face, hand clutching the soaked envelope. She didn't know what would happen next, only that the battle had truly begun. From afar, the flash of red and blue lights climbed the hill, police sirens wailing through the storm. Clara turned toward them, her lips pressed thin, and for the first time in years, Irene saw fear flickering in her sister's eyes. For the first time, Clara Moore was no longer in control. Martha Police Station was lit up like daylight. Reporters crowded the gates. 2 women walked in from opposite directions, Irene with dark-rimmed eyes and a hard, determined gait. Clara in a white coat, light makeup, still unnervingly immaculate. In the interrogation room, Detective Owens, the lead on the reinvestigation, looked at the sisters with a calm voice. You are both summoned regarding the death of Marcus Lee and the 2009 crash. I expect your cooperation. Irene set the sealed envelope on the table. I have proof Clara Moore was driving that night and that she's connected to Marcus's death. Clara smiled gently and sat down. I have proof my sister forged records and threatened Marcus to force false testimony. The air thickened. Owens motioned for his assistant to bring up the projector. A recording played Irene's voice, clear, flat, and cold. If you don't do as I say, I'll make you disappear, Marcus. This whole town will never find your body. Irene froze. She jumped up. No, that's not me. My voice was doctored. Clara tilted her head and feigned shock. Oh, Irene, what would make you say such things? Do you want to go to prison that badly? Owens frowned and looked at Irene. You claim it's falsified. Do you have proof? Irene trembled. I have system logs from the hospital. She edited the file herself. Where are those logs? Owens asked. They're on my computer. But Owens cut her off. I'm sorry. We executed a warrant at your home this morning. Nothing was found. Irene went pale. What? Clara interjected softly. See? I warned you. You're so consumed you can imagine data. Owen's tone shifted. He turned to Irene. We also have video from the pier camera. Watch. The screen flickered. The footage showed a rainy night, a figure at the end of the pier with a silhouette identical to Irene's, holding something that flashed metal in the light. A shot rang out, then someone ran away. Blood on the boards, wind moaning the dark coat, the stance everything alarmingly like Irene. She staggered backward, face white. No, I couldn't have. I didn't do that. Owens watched in silence, his expression heavy. Clara sat beside her and softly laid a hand on Irene's shoulder, voice full of weary sorrow, but with a poisonous edge. You shouldn't have gone back to the pier, Irene. You knew the cameras were everywhere. Guilt catches up to you. Irene shoved her hand away, screaming, You're the murderer! You staged everything! 2 officers moved quickly to restrain her. That's enough, Owens said sternly. Irene Moore, you are to be detained pending investigation. Cold handcuffs snapped around her wrists. Irene tried to look back at Clara. Clara rose and wore the same soft, devout smile she had perfected for the cameras. You're exhausted, Irene. Rest. When you wake, everything will be better. Irene screamed, You won't get away with it. I have real proof. They'll find it, The door slammed. Her cries echoed down the corridor. Clara straightened her coat and stepped out, offering a demure smile to the waiting reporters. "Thank you for your concern. I only hope my sister gets the help she needs. Everything I've done is to protect the family." Flashes popped from the press. In the cold, rainy night, Clara's smile showed up sharp and flawless on every screen, a perfect mask, beautiful and empty. In the back of a police cruiser, Irene looked out the window, eyes rimmed with tears, but burning with fierce light. "No, Clara, not this time. You won't win." The cell was icy cold. Gray walls and a white light streaked the room. Irene sat on the metal bed, hands clasped, staring at the scuffed floor. The handcuffs had been removed, but the red marks around her wrists still showed. Outside, rain rattled on the tin roof, mingling with the clang of metal. Everything felt oppressively still. She had lost everything. Her reputation, her job, her son, and now her freedom. The heavy metal door clicked open. A young woman stepped in, a badge hung from her neck. Detective Sarah Nguyen, Internal Affairs. She looked under 30, with a sharp face and calm, steady eyes. "Irene Moore?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but firm. "Yes, here to hear more charges?" Irene replied, bitter and exhausted. Sarah pulled a chair and opened a thin folder. "No, I came for something else. I reviewed the Marcus Lee files. Some things don't add up." Irene looked up, the first flicker of hope in her eyes in days. "Don't add up how?" Sarah set a tablet on the table. The screen showed system log entries, timestamps, device IDs, access markers. The peer camera footage was altered at 3:14 a.m., 2 hours after the shooting. The edit was pushed by a security vendor technician from a server belonging to the company Clara Moore hired. Irene held her breath. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Sarah said. "There's an entry. Video patch upload source MTH admin server. That's your sister's system." Irene lunged up, tears spilling. "My God, you believe me?" Sarah's tone softened but stayed resolute. "I don't take sides. I follow the data. And the data says someone staged evidence to frame you." Sarah opened another file, a still from a different camera opposite the pier. Grainy, but clear enough the figure who appeared after Marcus was shot was not Irene. The woman wore a light-colored coat. Sarah zoomed and adjusted contrast. The face came into focus, Clara Moore. Irene covered her mouth. "It's her. It's Clara." Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the screen. "I don't yet have enough to charge, but if you cooperate, I can push to reopen the case. We need to verify the original audio files and trace the account that uploaded the doctored data." Irene nodded, her voice shaking. "Do you know how long I've waited to hear that?" Later that night, Sarah returned to the cell after briefing her superiors. "Good news," she said. "I got a warrant to access your sister's company servers. Problem is, someone inside has already scrubbed most of the data. I need you to remember exactly what Marcus gave you." Irene closed her eyes and tried to piece it together. "A USB, a stack of transfer papers, and a thick sealed envelope I didn't get to open." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Where's the envelope?" Irene froze. "I think it fell when the police arrested me." Sarah's expression tightened. "So it's with evidence control." She stood, voice urgent. "If that envelope still exists, it could directly link the financial transfers to your sister. We have to move before they clean up anything else." Irene gripped Sarah's hand. "Thank you. You're the first person who didn't call me crazy." Sarah gave a small, serious smile. "Don't thank me. I've seen rich, well-spoken people bury others for too long. I won't let that happen again." That night, Irene lay on the metal cot, but she didn't feel afraid for the first time in a long while. Someone believed the facts. The truth was coming back to light. She looked up at the ceiling and managed a tired smile. Clara, the game you've been running for 16 years, it's about to collapse. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and even behind bars, Irene held something Clara never could: the faith of justice. Late night. Outside the precinct, the rain still whispered steadily. Sarah stood in the corridor, glancing around before unlocking the evidence room. The heavy metal door groaned open with a sharp clack, releasing a wave of cold air. She turned and gestured. Irene, temporarily released to assist with investigation, slipped inside, wrapped in a gray coat to avoid being recognized. "Are you sure no one knows about this?" Irene whispered. Sarah's voice was low but certain. "Only you and me. The outer cameras are disabled for 10 minutes. We move fast." In the dim light, they opened one metal drawer after another, labels marked by case numbers. Finally, Sarah pointed to a cabinet in the back. Case number M 2009 CR. Inside was a brown envelope, sealed with a red strip, its edges warped from water damage. She lifted it carefully. Irene's heart pounded. "That's it." Sarah unsealed the envelope. Inside were bank statements, cash receipt photos, and a crumpled piece of paper. The ink was smudged, but the words were still legible. "Transfer $80,000 to Sergeant D. Owens to expedite the accident file." Below it, Clara Moore's signature. Sarah froze. "Sergeant Owens. That's Detective Owens, the one running the reinvestigation." The air turned solid. Irene felt her stomach twist cold. My God, he's been covering for her from the start. Sarah's jaw tightened. This changes everything. If he's compromised, we can't trust anyone inside that unit. You need to keep this safe. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hall. Sarah motioned for silence. They ducked behind the metal cabinets. A familiar voice rang out. "I said clear everything. Nothing that can hurt Moore stays here. Got it?" Owens. Irene held her breath, fingers gripping the cabinet edge. A staffer replied, "Sir, what about the old Marcus Lee envelope?" "Burn it tonight." Sarah glanced at Irene, her eyes icy sharp. Now or never. They slid quietly along the wall, moving toward the back exit. Owens's footsteps grew closer. A flashlight beam swept across the room, grazing the edge of Irene's coat. Her chest seized. Sarah yanked her back, pressing her against the wall behind the shelving. Owens paused, scanned the area for a moment, then walked away. When his footsteps faded, Irene nearly collapsed, heart hammering. Sarah clutched the envelope. "We're leaving, now." They slipped out the side door into the rear parking lot. Sarah opened the trunk of her car, locked the envelope in a metal case. "We need an independent witness to verify this document before they twist it." "Witness?" Irene asked. "Yeah, and I know who." The car sped off into the night, slicing through sheets of rain. Irene stared out the window, streetlights blurring past. "You know, Sarah," she murmured, "for 16 years I begged people to believe me. They never did. But now, I don't need them to believe. I just need them to see." Sarah gave a faint, confident smile. "They will. I promise." The next morning, Sarah sent a copy of the bribery record to the district attorney through an anonymous internal channel. At the same time, Irene walked into a press room packed with flashing cameras. She took the microphone, her voice steady, cold, and clear. "I was accused because I believed justice still existed, but today I have proof that the person behind all of this isn't just a woman named Clara Moore. It's an entire system that was bought to protect her." The room erupted. Reporters shouted. Lenses clicked. At the back, Clara sat with her legs crossed, her smile slowly fading. Irene looked straight into the nearest camera. "This is only the beginning, and I won't stop until every truth is spoken." The courtroom was packed. Cold white lights gleamed over the witness benches. Outside, the press swarmed. cameras aimed directly at the defense table where the names Clara Moore and Detective David Owens now faced Irene Moore across the aisle. Attorney Allen stood beside Irene, giving a calm nod. "Just tell the truth," he whispered. "The evidence will do the rest." The judge struck the gavel. This hearing reopening the 2009 accident case and the murder of Marcus Lee is now in session. A heavy silence fell. The prosecutor began. "We present evidence that Mrs. Clara Moore bribed law enforcement to conceal her culpability in the 2009 homicide and later orchestrated the killing of Marcus Lee." On the screen appeared the bank slip Clara's signature above the name Sergeant D. Owens. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Owens went pale, while Clara maintained that eerily calm, unbroken smile. The prosecutor continued, "We also have the original, unaltered traffic footage proving that the driver responsible for the crash was Mrs. Moore." The screen flickered again. A black car speeding through the rain, headlights slicing the dark, and in the rearview mirror, Clara's face flashed into view. Murmurs erupted around the room. "Order!" the judge barked. Allen stepped forward. "Mrs. Irene Moore, please tell the court why you remained silent for 16 years." Irene rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly, voice low but steady. "Because I believed in justice. I thought truth would speak for itself someday. I was wrong. I stayed silent too long enough for my sister, the woman I once loved like a mother, to turn my own son against me and make me look insane." She turned toward Clara, eyes glistening but fierce. "You took everything from me, but the one thing you'll never have is peace." Clara tilted her head, smiling faintly. "You're being dramatic, Irene. No one here believes that sentimental nonsense." Allen gestured to the technician. "Before Mrs. Moore denies any further, the court will now hear the final recording left by Marcus Lee." The speakers hissed, then a trembling male voice filled the room. "Clara, stop! You've done enough. Don't let Irene take the blame." Then a woman's voice, cold, precise. "Guilt is the only thing she's ever been good at, Marcus." The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted. The judge slammed his gavel again and again. Clara sat frozen, her lips twitching. Suddenly, Owens slammed his hand on the table. "I had nothing to do with it. She made me do it." Cameras whipped toward him. "She bribed me, threatened me. I just followed orders." "You realize you just confessed to bribery," the judge said sharply. Owen's mouth snapped shut. Too late. Clara spun toward him, screaming, "Idiot! He's lying! I never—" Allen cut in, his voice like a blade. "Then how do you explain your fingerprints on the envelope containing the cash?" Clara froze. The practiced smile vanished. The judge's tone hardened. "This court will recess for verification, but based on current evidence and testimony, I hereby order the immediate detention of Clara Moore and Detective David Owens on charges of bribery, fraud, and murder." The gavel struck. Reporters surged forward. 2 officers moved in with cuffs. Clara thrashed, shouting in fury. "You'll regret this. Everything I did was to protect this family. Irene, you're no different from me." Irene watched quietly, tears falling not from pity, but release. Clara was led away, hair disheveled, face twisted under a storm of camera flashes. Irene turned and saw Jacob in the gallery, motionless, his expression shattered. He stepped forward, voice trembling. "Mom, She cupped his face, smiling softly. "It's okay, Jacob. Now you know. I don't need your apology, just your faith." Jacob broke down, hugging her tightly. The room fell silent. 16 years of waiting, and at last, Irene had reclaimed the only thing that truly mattered, her son's trust. Night settled slowly over St. Martha. The women's detention wing lay under a pale wash of fluorescent light. Wind howled through the barred windows, blending with the metallic clatter of guards' boots echoing down the corridor. Clara sat in the corner of her cot, hair tangled, lips cracked. The crisp white blouse she once wore on television had been replaced by a faded gray prison uniform. Her hands were clasped tightly, trembling slightly. A small mirror was bolted to the wall in front of her. The reflection staring back looked like a stranger. She gazed at it for a long moment, then gave a dry, brittle laugh. "Irene, you think you've won?" she whispered hoarsely. "The only difference between us is that you got lucky someone believed you." A female guard opened the door, set a tray on the floor. "Eat. You've got a psych evaluation tomorrow." Clara didn't answer. When the guard left, she slipped a small torn note from her sleeve, ripped from the envelope she'd hidden before being arrested. On it, scrawled in shaky ink, "Someone else knows the truth. Watch what you left behind." Her fingers clenched around the paper, eyes glinting. "It's not over yet, Irene." Outside the detention center, Irene sat in a parked car with Sarah. They had just left the courthouse. Streetlights glowed gold across the windshield, casting the reflection of two women, one once buried, one who dared to dig justice back up. Sarah's voice was low, steady. "They'll transfer Clara to the state holding facility in the morning. Owens confessed everything. It's all over." Irene stared out at the drizzle on the glass. "No, Sarah. Nothing's ever really over. Some wounds don't disappear. They just fall asleep." Sarah said nothing. She knew that feeling, the kind of victory that doesn't feel like one. Later that night, Irene returned to her old house. The air smelled faintly of dust and rain. The picture frame of her and Jacob still leaned slightly askew on the table. Jacob was home, waiting in the living room. "I fixed the door," he said quietly. "No more drafts." Irene nodded, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you." A long silence stretched between them. Jacob lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was blind for too long." Irene brushed his hair back and smiled gently. "No, you just trusted the wrong person, and I stayed silent too long." They sat together, watching the rain ease outside. On the table, the old envelope from Marcus still lay untouched, a relic of all those buried years. Near midnight, Irene stepped out onto the porch. The night wind was cool against her face. In the distance, a police siren wailed, fading into the sound of waves hitting the lake shore. She closed her eyes and drew a long, steady breath. For the first time in 16 years, the guilt was gone. And yet, something inside her refused to rest. Clara's eyes, that furious, burning glare behind the bars, haunted her still. Someone else knows the truth. Marcus's warning echoed faintly in her mind. Irene unlocked her phone, scrolling through her archived folders. A new one blinked at the bottom of the list, one she'd never seen before. Its name, Our Archive. She tapped it. The screen flickered, then a line of text appeared. "If you're reading this, it means one person still hasn't been exposed." The glow of the screen reflected in Irene's eyes, not fear this time, but a spark of intuition. Inside the prison, Clara sat perfectly still, staring through the bars into the darkness beyond. A thin smile crept across her lips, sharp as a blade. "They think they've buried everything?" she murmured. "There's still one more, and he'll finish the job." Tuesday morning. The Northfield prison sat under the pale light of early winter. A metal door creaked open. The guard slipped an envelope through the slot. Gray, unmarked, no return address. Clara picked it up. Her eyes, sunken but oddly bright, scanned the page inside a short typed note without a signature. "They think you're the only one who knows what happened in 2009, but I was there too. Say nothing. Everything will soon be corrected." She read it again and again. Then a faint smile curled across her lips. "I knew it," she whispered. "He's still out there." She hid the note beneath the mattress. Light from the small window fell across her face, half in shadow, half in glow, as if the human and the monster within her had finally become one. At that same moment, in St. Martha, Irene was starting her morning in the newly repaired house. The walls, once stained by smoke, were now painted a soft cream. The photo of mother and son hung straight again, but peace, it seemed, was still a luxury. She poured herself coffee and stepped onto the porch. There, on the doormat, lay an envelope, no stamp, no address. She froze, a tremor running through her chest. Clara had once sent her countless threats that began exactly this way, but this handwriting was different, crisp, printed, precise. The man you thought was dead isn't. Inside was an old photograph. Marcus Lee standing beside an unfamiliar man. Half the man's face had been torn away, only a pair of cold eyes stared back at the camera. On the back, a handwritten line read, "Marcus didn't die because of Clara alone." The coffee cup slipped from Irene's hand, shattering on the porch. Steam rose like smoke between her feet. She stumbled backward, heart pounding. That afternoon, she took the photo to Sarah's office. Sarah frowned the moment she saw it. "This is real," she said quietly. "But that man, he's not in any file. Maybe one of Clara's accomplices, someone who helped stage the pier shooting." Sarah nodded slowly. "If that's true, he's still free." Irene's voice trembled. "You think he'll come for me?" Sarah met her gaze. "Not if. When?" That night, Irene was alone. Jacob had gone to stay at a friend's. She sat at her desk, writing an addendum for the police, trying to force calm through the growing dread. Outside, wind hissed through the cracks, carrying a damp chill. A faint click sounded down the hall, like a window latch shifting. She went to check everything was still, untouched. But when she returned, the photo of Marcus was gone. Irene's pulse hammered. She tore through drawers, checked the locks, the doors all shut, untouched. Then her phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "I told you, Irene. No one really disappears." A bead of cold sweat slid down her back. She stepped to the door and looked outside. Nothing. Only the long shadow of the trees and the whisper of insects in the grass. Back in Northfield, Clara sat writing in her journal when the guard dropped off her dinner tray. "You've got another letter." She opened it. Another printed note. "Everything is falling back into place. Stay silent a little longer. I'll handle the rest." Clara smiled faintly. "The rest." Then she tilted her head toward the ceiling and murmured, "See, Irene? I wasn't lying. The story was never over. Night." Irene sat curled by the window, staring into the darkness. She could feel it, an unseen hand moving out there, somewhere beyond the glass, and this time it didn't wear Clara's face. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Who's still out there?" A sudden gust slammed the back door. Clack! An envelope slid through the gap, landing softly on the floor. Across the front, a single line was typed in black. "You shouldn't dig any deeper." Morning. A thick fog blanketed the town, muffling every sound in its path. Sarah pulled up to Irene's house, her face drawn tight with a kind of tension Irene hadn't seen before. "We've got a problem," she said the moment she stepped inside. Irene froze mid-step. "What kind of problem?" Sarah laid 2 identical envelopes on the table, one addressed to Irene, the other sent to the police department, but redirected to Clara Moore at Northfield Prison. Both bore the same printed message: "Stay silent, or someone else will die." Irene's breath caught. "Clara got one too?" Sarah nodded grimly. "Just came through. Same paper, same ink, same interstate postmark. Whoever's doing this is watching both of you." At Northfield, Clara sat in the glass-walled interrogation room, a camera whirring quietly behind the one-way mirror. A guard slid an envelope across the table. She opened it, scanned the lines, and gave a small, knowing laugh, half amusement, half unease. "So," she whispered, "he's still alive. I knew it." I bet Irene got the same thing. When she requested her lawyer, it wasn't him who entered, it was Sarah. "We need to talk, Mrs. Moore," Sarah began. Clara arched a brow. "About what? I thought I'd outlived my usefulness." Sarah placed another envelope on the table. "Same sender. The other one was sent to your sister." Clara went still. The name Irene flickered across her expression like a spark: hate, fear, and something close to curiosity. "Is she all right?" Clara asked softly. "For now," Sarah said. "But if we don't find out who this is, neither of you will stay that way." That night, Sarah arranged an off-the-record video call, 10 minutes only. No audio recording, no official log. Irene sat in the security office, the blue glow of the monitor casting her face in shadow. On the screen, Clara appeared from her cell. For a long moment, the two women just looked at each other, 16 years and a lifetime apart, separated by glass and silence. Irene spoke first, her voice steady but cold. "You've won more times than I can count. What else do you want now?" Clara's lips curved faintly. "This time it's not me." "You always say that." "No, Irene, I swear. There's someone else, someone even I was afraid of." Irene said nothing. Sarah glanced between them, brow furrowed. Clara's voice lowered, her tone almost trembling. "He knows everything. He's the one I met before the accident. He said if I didn't deal with Richard Hale, my family would disappear." Sarah's pen froze mid-note. "What's his name?" Clara looked up slowly. "He called himself Mr. Gray. I never knew his real one. Marcus did, and that's why he died." The air in the room thickened, heavy and electric. Sarah wrote quickly. Irene stared at the screen, heart hammering. "How do I know this isn't just another lie, Clara? Another story to pull me back in?" Clara lowered her head, her voice hoarse. "Because for the first time, Irene, I'm afraid too." The call ended. Static hummed faintly in Irene's ears long after the screen went black. Sarah turned to her. "If she's telling the truth, this thing is bigger than we thought." Irene's eyes hardened. "No, bigger than me and her, but not bigger than justice." Outside, the night had settled over the lake, dark and still. Then the phone rang. A number with no name. She answered, and a man's low, rasping voice filled the line. "I warned you not to dig deeper. This time, I won't miss anyone." Irene's grip tightened around the phone. Her pulse roared in her ears. The window rattled under a gust of wind, and in the reflection of the glass, she saw it. A lone figure standing by the fence, unmoving, watching the house. It rained for 3 days straight. St. Martha wore its old coat again, gray, damp, and heavy. News spread. Detective Sarah Nguyen, the young investigator, was found dead in her car on the highway, ruled an accidental fall asleep at the wheel. But Irene knew better, that was not an accident. When she heard the news, she went numb. Beside Sarah's body, police found an envelope containing a single typed line. "Those who dig will be buried with it." Irene gripped the paper, hands shaking. Fear mixed with a sickeningly familiar recognition. He's back. At Northfield Prison, Clara was taken to an interview room. She was handed a newspaper with Sarah's photo on the front page. Her expression went dark. "No way," she muttered. "He said he was only going to threaten." "Who is he?" the guard asked. Clara didn't answer. She glanced up at the red blinking camera on the wall and gave a cold little smile. "If you're listening, Gray," she said softly, "I understand." I won't say another word. That evening, Irene sat alone at her computer and opened the files Sarah had sent before she died. One file had a simple name, Grey Root. She clicked it open. Inside was an old photo, 3 people, her mother, Clara, and a middle-aged man with his hands on both their shoulders, kindly face, early gray hair. The file name read, Leonard Moore, JPG. Irene froze. Leonard Moore, the sister's father. No, it can't be, she whispered. A note from Sarah under the image read, Leonard Moore, died 2010, body not positively identified. Police only recovered a wedding ring at the scene. It came back to her, the closed casket at that funeral. No one allowed to view the body. In the years after, Clara never spoke of their father. Irene had always believed he died in a plane crash. Now memories began to tilt. Irene called the prison. Clara picked up, her voice hoarse over the speaker. What now? Do you remember father? Irene asked, voice trembling. Don't play nostalgia games with me, Irene. No, listen. Father isn't dead. He is Mr. Gray. Silence. Then Clara laughed, a dry, choked sound that was half panic, half madness. No, you're wrong. He loved Mother. He wouldn't... Clara. Irene cut in, tears spilling. He forced you to deal with Richard Hale, didn't he? He threatened you. A long pause. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice breaking. Yes, he said if I didn't, he'd set the family straight. He called it restoring the Moore honor. That same night, Irene received an anonymous email. You're grown now, Irene. Father only wanted a clean family. Stop before it's too late. She threw the phone and screamed, You are not my father! Thunder rolled, curtains snapping in the wind. She ran out onto the porch and across the street, under a dim street lamp. A man stood motionless, hat pulled low over his face. He looked up for an instant, and Irene saw those eyes. The eyes of her father. At that exact moment in the prison, Clara bolted upright, a chill crawling down her spine. A small scrap of paper had been slipped under her cell door. She unfolded it. The handwriting read, Good job, Clara. Now it's your sister's turn. She let the paper fall. Her eyes went blank. No, Father. Father is alive, she screamed, pounding the wall. Her voice echoed down the corridor. Guards rushed in. But Clara only laughed, tears mixing with a grotesque, hysterical sound. He's coming, and when he comes, no one will escape. A moonless night. Wind howled through the forest outside St. Martha. Irene drove alone, following the coordinates from the last email her father had sent. The woods were unnervingly still. Her headlights swept across a rusted sign, Moore Sons Warehouse, since 1974. The place that once powered her family's shipping empire, the place where Leonard Moore had vanished 16 years ago. She parked, heart hammering. A faint light glowed from inside the warehouse. Footsteps echoed slow, deliberate, as if someone had known exactly when she would arrive. You're still punctual, just like your mother. A gravelly male voice called out, calm and chilling. From the darkness, Leonard Moore stepped forward. His hair was snow-white, his face carved with time, but his eyes still burned cold and metallic. He wore a black suit, a cane in one hand, his gaze that of both priest and executioner. Father, Irene's voice broke. Don't call me that, Leonard said softly but firmly. I may have given you life, but you've disgraced this family's name. Irene took a step back. Disgraced? You call covering up murder honor? He raised a brow. You don't understand. Hale betrayed me. He was going to expose the Moore accounts. Without me, Clara would have faced the death penalty years ago. No, you didn't save her. You controlled her. You made her believe killing was loyalty. Leonard let out a raspy laugh. Protecting honor is never a crime, Irene. You're just too weak to see it. She met his gaze, eyes blazing. Weak? You call murder, bribery, and manipulating your own daughter's strength? I call it responsibility, Leonard replied coldly. I taught you to protect the Moore name at any cost, but you dragged it through the courts, humiliated us before the world. You betrayed your own blood. No, Irene whispered, trembling but defiant. I saved it, the last piece of humanity you threw away. His hand tightened on the cane. Anger flickered in his eyes. Your mother said the same thing before she died. You know why she had to, don't you? The air froze. Irene's voice faltered. What do you mean? Leonard stepped closer, his tone steady, every word like a blade. She knew. She threatened to tell the police. I couldn't let her destroy what I'd built. Irene's breath caught. You killed Mother? He nodded, without hesitation. A necessary accident, just like Hale. Just like Marcus, and if you don't stop, you'll be next. Irene stood motionless. For a long moment, fear, pain, and fury merged into one. She looked straight at him, the man who'd taught her to read, to speak, to believe that truth never dies. And now he was the last lie she had to face. You're wrong, she said quietly. A family doesn't need honor. It needs love. Leonard's voice sharpened, cutting through the air. Love? That weakness is what rotted this family from the inside out. No, Irene replied, her eyes gleaming under the flickering light. It's what's kept me standing and what will finally break you. He let out a harsh laugh, raising his hand. Metal flashed in the dark, a handgun. I'll show you what real honor looks like. He pulled the trigger. Click. A dry, empty sound. No shot fired. Leonard froze. Irene's eyes glistened, steady and calm. I removed the bullets, she whispered. I knew you'd try. The back door burst open. Sarah, alive, wearing a bulletproof vest, stepped in, gun drawn, cuffs ready. Game's over, Mr. Moore. Leonard stared, stunned. No, that's impossible. Sarah's tone was ice. You can't kill everyone. He gave a hoarse laugh, tossing the gun to the ground and raising his hands. You think you've won? The Moore name never disappears. He turned to Irene, and for the first time, there was no rage in his eyes, only a hollow despair. I just wanted to keep my family together, but I'm the one who tore it apart. Irene's voice softened, trembling but resolute. Because you never understood love can't be contained. Leonard gave a faint smile, closing his eyes. His voice fell to a whisper. Maybe this time, I truly lose. Sarah cuffed him. Irene watched in silence as they led her father away, tears sliding down her face, her lips pressed into a line of quiet, unbroken strength. A winter morning. Pale sunlight slipped through the iron bars of Northfield Prison, thin and cold. The air carried the scent of metal, and faintly, the lavender from a small garden the inmates were allowed to tend. Irene walked down the long corridor, her footsteps echoing softly. Fear no longer lived in her. Only a calm sadness remained quiet, like ashes after a storm. The door to the visitation room opened. Clara sat on the other side of the thick glass gray prison uniform, hair cut short, her face thinner but her eyes clearer than ever. No longer cold, human. They looked at each other for a long time. For the first time in 16 years, neither spoke first. Finally, Irene placed her hand gently on the glass. Are you holding up? Clara gave a tired smile. Holding up? No one really does in here. But at least, I'm still alive. Irene nodded slowly. Father's been arrested. He confessed to everything. Clara said nothing. The faint clink of her chains was the only sound as she clasped her hands together. "He used to promise he'd protect me," she whispered. "But really, I was just his knife." "So were we both," Irene said softly. They shared a faint, bitter smile, a silent acknowledgement between two women scarred by the same hands. "You know," Irene said after a pause, her voice trembling, "when I found out he was alive, I didn't feel happy. I just felt lighter. Because I finally understood you weren't born cruel, Clara. You just never got to learn how to love." Clara let out a short, rough laugh. "And you did? You hated me once. You wanted to destroy me with your truth. But somehow, you survived. That's something I never could." Irene pressed her lips together. "Because you've always been afraid of being alone." Clara closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Yes, and in the end, I got exactly what I feared. But you know, Irene, for once, I really am sorry." Silence filled the room. The light from the window reflected across the glass, blending their faces into one faint shape. Irene looked at her sister, no longer a villain, just a tired woman who had done terrible things in the name of love and approval. "How's Jacob?" Clara asked quietly. "He's good. He's back in school. He's writing about our case. He wants to call it The Family That Lied." Clara let out a small, tearful laugh. "That's a good title. He takes after you." Irene smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. "No, he takes after you. Stubborn, and never gives up." The buzzer sounded. Visiting hours were over. Irene stood. "I'll come back. Not to forgive, but to remember that I still have a sister." Clara's voice broke softly. "Do you ever wonder, if we'd been born into a different family, maybe things would have been different?" Irene's eyes filled, but her smile stayed. "No, because without all this pain, I'd have never learned what love really means." She placed her hand on the glass once more. Clara mirrored her, palms touching through the barrier, two broken lives finally meeting where the cracks aligned. That afternoon, Irene left the prison. The sky was gray, but it no longer felt heavy. She walked across the old bridge leading to the docks, the place where everything began. Now the water was calm, the waves gentle, reflecting the dim winter light. She stood there for a long time, eyes closed, letting the wind carry away the old voices in her head. "Family isn't a perfect place," she whispered. "It's the place that makes you want to pick up the pieces, even after it's shattered." A single tear slipped down her cheek, not from sorrow, but relief. Then Irene turned, walking away, her small figure fading into the wide, forgiving sky. In the distance, the sunset broke through the clouds, soft, golden, and full of forgiveness. 3 years later, spring arrived early in St. Martha, the first one with rain in decades. The city seemed washed clean, fresh painted rooftops, gardens reborn in soft green. Irene stepped out of the small lakeside house where she and Jacob had lived since the trial. No more reporters, no more cameras, only wind, water, and the faint smell of baked bread each morning. On the breakfast table, Jacob had left a note. "I'm off to an interview in Boston. I told them about you not for pity, but so they'll know how you lived." She smiled, tracing the handwriting with her fingers. Since that day, Jacob had become the young man she once knew, imperfect, honest, capable of love and trust. Sometimes Irene still thought she heard Marcus's voice or Sarah calling her name in the wind, but she would only smile because now the past no longer frightened her. At Northfield Correctional Center, Clara Moore stood at the podium for the final hearing. Over the past 3 years, she had become a model inmate teaching young offenders, painting, and writing letters about remorse and redemption. Today was her parole review. The judge asked, "Mrs. Moore, Do you have anything to say before the court decides? Clara looked down at the sheet of paper in her hands, lines scribbled unevenly. I used to think family was something you had to win, but now I know it's where you learn how to lose with grace. She lifted her head, voice calm, but freed at last. If I'm released, I don't want to run from my past. I just want to talk to my sister once more without a pane of glass between us. The room fell silent. Light poured across Clara's face, revealing everything, the wrinkles, the scars, and a peace that was real. That same afternoon, Irene was signing copies of her debut book, Whisper of the Moor. It wasn't a story of accusation, it was a story of closure. A reporter asked, "Do you still hate anyone after all this?" Irene smiled gently. "No. Hate is how people keep someone trapped inside their hearts. I chose to let go." Applause filled the hall. Outside, the afternoon sunlight poured golden and warm through the windows. A week later, Irene visited her mother's grave. The cemetery sat high on a hill overlooking the old docks. She placed a bouquet of lavender and a letter on the stone, reading softly. "Mom, I finally understand. Love isn't what keeps people near, it's what lets them go without fear." She sat there for a long time. When she finally stood, sunlight hit her eyes, blurring her vision, and she didn't notice it at first. Another bouquet already lying there. White flowers, the kind her father used to bring on her mother's birthday. She froze. A small card tucked among the stems read, in italic print, unsigned, "I'm sorry." Her breath caught. Her heart pounded. No one knew Leonard Moore had been transferred to a federal facility after his life sentence. No one knew if he was still alive. Irene looked around only the empty path, the whispering pines, and the wind. But inside, she felt something new, not fear, but acceptance. "Father, if you're still alive, I hope you've finally learned what peace feels like." Evening fell. She left the cemetery, walking slowly down the sunlit road, the hem of her dress brushing the grass. She smiled as the wind murmured through the trees, a language only the healed could understand. In the fading light, her shadow stretched long behind her, not falling toward the past, but reaching straight ahead, into the soft, forgiving glow of tomorrow,